Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of House of the Dragon Episode 2, where marrying a 12-year-old is unspeakable, but a 15-year-old, hey, well, so long as she brings you toys. Viserys is like, that's what I love about these Westeros girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age. The look of this series just gets better and better, so let's break down the cool visual details, the deeper layers of meaning you might have missed, starting with Because I Am Crazy. What exactly is going on in this opening title sequence? It's set to Ramin Djawadi's Game of Thrones theme music. Using the same song does cynically suggest the petty games played by the Westerosians 200 years from now are the same ones about to be played by these a-holes. Compared to the map imagery of the Game of Thrones opening, this one uses stone dials as blood snakes through each dial, forming a symbolic chain of violence begetting violence, but also a family tree, a literal bloodline. Each dial represents a specific member of the Targaryen family tree. The fact that it's a dial that turns suggests that with each link of this chain could directionally change the vector of the bloodline based on what their moral alignment is. Notice the recurring crown on many of these dials. This is the one worn by Viserys, and before him, Jaehaerys. This is the crown of Aegon the Conqueror. This crown represents whoever the king is on that generational tier. And you'll notice that crown is usually paired with another dial representing a marriage union. The blood drowning each dial represents these rulers' deaths, but that death begetting a new generation of bloody rulers. The first dial, of course, is Aegon's dial, depicting dragon stones swarmed by dragons. These dragons are not a loving family, but rather in combat with each other, according to the audio description. Thus, we are going to begin every episode of the show with dragon versus dragon. The gates of Dragonstone pop upward and the tableau sinks, allowing blood to pour in and blood to flood outward to drown the whole realm. This blood river forks down a wall with engravings showing dragons torching infantry, cavalry, and archers. This is likely Aegon's conquest, and it flows into two dials, representing Aegon's two sisters, Rhaenys and Visenya. Then onto another dial that floods. This is Rhaenys' son, Aenys. Now notice we do not see a dial for Maegor the Cruel, as that would be Visenya's son and be on the other side of that left dial that we saw before. Then the bloodline zips to two paired dials for Jaehaerys and Alysanne. The blood explodes then into branches, as the Targaryen family tree did at this point. We glide upward to two dials that are already drowned in blood for Jaehaerys' late son Balon and his wife Alyssa, who were Viserys' parents. The blood river now pours off a ledge, while in the background it snakes toward a blue-colored wall with a dial showing the Valyrian seahorse for Corlys Velaryon. So the blood that the dial touches here is Rhaenys, Aemon's daughter, the queen who never was, who gets married to Corlys. Meanwhile, another branch of the river flows into a crown dial that does not flood. That represents the current king, Viserys, unflooded because he's still alive. For now. Beside him is the sigil for House Arryn, flooded for Aemma Arryn, his late wife who died in episode 1. But notice though that Viserys' bloodline branches to the left toward that green wall where the Greens, aka the Hightowers, are, foretelling Viserys moving on to Alicent in this episode. But then we cut to a shot where the bloodline flows into a dial with the House Hightower lighthouse representing Alicent, soon to be queen, and you'll notice to the level above her is a dial representing her father Otto. Now next we see three interlocking circles of the Valyrian steel necklace that Daemon gave Rhaenyra last episode. This one obviously representing Rhaenyra, this dial rising high above the blood to stay untouched by it. Then we quickly pass under a gate showing a dragon fanning its wings over the houses of Westeros. I believe those sigils are Baratheon, Hightower, Blackwood, Dustin, Starpike, Lannister, Velaryon, Stark, and then maybe Greyjoy. Some of these are important, some of them are lower houses, whatever, they all look cool. Lastly, we see that all of these dials rest upon the layers of Viserys' stone model of Valyria, proving our theory correct last episode that that model might be part of the new opening title sequence. Running down the middle of that model, you can see pairings representing the marriages through the ages through which the royal lineage ran, but then closer to the bottom of it, a few isolated ones where the bloodline ends, because we are not yet sure which of these characters will bear the heirs to the crown. But we are sure if you look at a family tree, just don't, you'll spoil yourself. And yes, I will be monitoring this sequence closely for updates to it as characters die or produce new heirs, because I'm crazy. And we end the main title showing the golden Targaryen sigil, all of these blood rivers feeding the fire beneath. Fire and blood, the Targaryen house words in the title of the novel that this is based on. The opening shot shows two hands impaled on wood as crabs pick at them. This parallels the gnawing of flesh from King Viserys' hand by maggots later. From a nameless casualty to the king himself, these are all corpses on borrowed time. Everybody knows that mental health is important, which is why it's so frustrating that once you decide to see a therapist, finding one is so difficult. Well, BetterHelp makes that process way easier. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you think you might be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, BetterHelp is here to help. BetterHelp offers offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. BetterHelp allows you to message your therapist in a private online environment at your convenience. BetterHelp's network has over 20,000 therapists with a broad range of expertise and specialties, giving you access to help that may not be available in your area. Just fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and you'll be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Once you are matched, you can schedule secure video and phone sessions and exchange unlimited messages. Everything you share is completely confidential, and if you ever want to request a new therapist, you can at any time with no additional charge. Over 3 million people have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. If you are interested in improving your mental health with BetterHelp, you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/newrockstars or click the link in the description. That's BetterHelp.com/newrockstars for 10% off your first month. Crabs pick at a barnacled skull like the barnacled bust in Corlys's chamber later at the end of the episode. This dramatic crucifixion imagery we are seeing now is really through Corlys's existential fear. This is his Song of Ice and Fire, or really we should say, I guess, his Song of Sea and Crabs. Crabs pick at a gash on a man's foot, his bone is exposed, but he stirs, he's still alive. He's being eaten alive by crabs as a victim of Kragus the Crab Feeder, leader of the Triarchy, ravaging the Stepstones currently. The wide shot shows that these stakes are set up in the path of the tidal river, where crabs would come in, like the opening titles, a river of blood bringing death. But we smash cut to another red river, an overhead shot of an empty cup as Rhaenyra pours in wine, the red liquid pouring into a golden pit, like the blood pouring into the Targaryen sigil in the opening credits. The small council's discussing the death of Sir Ryan Redwine, that bearded Lord Commander of the Kingsguard who appeared in the background last episode. Corlys comes in late, wanting to hit back at Kragus and his Triarchy, who are funded by the Free Cities, many of which we saw in Game of Thrones, including Braavos, Lorath, Lys, Myr, Norvos, Pentos, Cohort, Tirosh, and Volantis. Notice how Master of Coin Lyman Beesbury says,
"In all of its history, my lord, the Seven Kingdoms have never entered open war with the Free Cities."
What reason does the crab feeder have to fear us?
Yeah, Corlys is focusing his anger on Moneybags Beesbury, a man who likely takes money from the Iron Bank located where? The Free City of Braavos. Major conflict of interest on this small council. And notice throughout this meeting, Corlys's punch card ball stays on the centerpiece. It's never moved to his plate, reflecting how he was never really part of this meeting. And at the end of this episode, we'll leave this council. When Rhaenyra gets booted from the meeting for pitching the one good idea, the doors are shut behind her, closing her out, an homage to the final shot of The Godfather, where Michael shuts out Kay. Sir Harold goes through the Kingsguard candidates, each represented by a figurine, some ornamented ceremony to mark the seriousness of the Kingsguard in this era, consistent with the way the show uses dials and balls and other tokens to represent people. Everyone is a piece on a game board. There's Sir Desmond Caron, Sir Raymond Mallister, House Corbray, House Crakall, and House Tarley. Otto reminds us the Mallisters of Seaguard protect against the Reavers from the Iron Islands, referring to the Greyjoys. Sir Criston has no heraldry because while he comes from House Cole of the Stormlands, he's actually a Dornishman. Notice how his figurine is a simple pillar, unadorned. Otto lurks in from behind while Rhaenys watches from the balcony, more interested in how the named heir makes her first official decision. In all the shots of Rhaenyra with Otto, Rhaenys can be seen snooping in the background because this queen who never was is deducing that if Rhaenyra was booted from the small council meeting, she and her husband Corlys might be able to play to the king's succession anxieties. Get our 12-year-old into hair and makeup stat! Rhaenyra inquires,
"You saw combat in the Stormlands?"
Dornish marches, Princess. I fought for a year as a foot soldier against the Dornish incursions. Sir Arlen Dondarrion knighted me after we raised 2 of the watchtowers along the Boneway.
The Dornish marches are areas between the Stormlands and Dorne. The Boneway is a treacherous pass through the Red Mountains. Aegon the Conqueror's attempt to conquer Dorne actually failed. This campaign killed his sister wife Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes. And now Rhaenyra offering Syrax to the Stepstones and wanting a Kingsguard who's actually seen combat? Rhaenyra is a natural wartime ruler. Viserys describes Valyria.
The Dragon Lords, the highest of the nobility, lived here, at the volcanic face, closest to the source of their magic and power. And this was the Anogrion, where the blood mages worked their craft.
The doom of Valyria was believed to be an eruption of the 14 Flames, a chain of volcanoes interconnected by mines that all erupted simultaneously and sunk the whole peninsula. Many believe this might have been triggered by magic, either by accident or by design. Viserys says,
The glory of old Valyria will never be seen again. 7 hills.
So Viserys bleakly believes that humanity's best days are behind them, while breaking a dragon figurine, reflecting his house's broken future. He dropped it though because of his wounded finger, which is also visible bandaged during his speech to Rhaenyra at the end of last episode, a literal form of his family's unhealable wound, the lie of their dragon power and their mad dreams. But the low sun silhouettes Viserys and Alicent here, it actually hangs low throughout the episode, foreshadowing Viserys' sunsetting reign. In nearly every shot of Viserys, even in the close-ups, the hilt of his Valyrian steel dagger pokes up into frame. Aegon's Song of Ice and Fire, always on his mind. Alicent and Rhaenyra pray in the sept. Above the altar is a statue of one of the seven. The audio description calls it a woman, suggesting this is the mother, which makes sense because they are both praying to their dead moms. At times, we cut to a high angle of these two with the mother statue not visible in these frames, meaning we are seeing these two daughters from the point of view of the mother above. Alicent places her hand on Rhaenyra's arm, and you can see Alicent's thumb is still raw from her picking at it. These past 6 months of lying to her friend about moving in on her dad have filled her with anxiety. Even this supposedly sweet moment between the two friends is actually manipulation that was at Viserys' request.
When I wish to talk with him, I know that I must make the effort.
Corlys asks Viserys again to intervene at the stepstones, dropping this line:
To elude a storm, you can either sail into it or around it, but you must never await its coming.
It's a really great analogy for a seafarer who's adrift on a vessel, but not for a land-bound castle dweller like Viserys, the guy who gave up dragon riding years ago and now just sits in place, in fear of a blizzard that is unavoidable, according to his great-great-grandfather's dream. While Viserys and Rhaenyra dine, his model of Valyria frames them in the foreground. Viserys is trying to prop up his dynasty upon the ruins of Valyria. Also, the secret moments that he's been sharing with Alicent is what is bringing this father and daughter together. It's almost like Alicent is in the room with them, chaperoning them. Now, Viserys' small cut last episode has completely festered into this infection. Do they not have bandages? Seriously? A freaking paper cut? But no, this is further proof that the cuts from the Iron Throne are uniquely unhealable and cursed in a way. There actually is a long-running theory that the Archmaesters, who hail from Old Town along with the Hightowers, Old Town being the former seat of power in Westeros before the Targaryens arrived, these Maesters could be conspiring in an Illuminati-type plot to weaken the power of the dragons and the influence of magic in the world with science-backed duplicitous advice and medical malpractice. Think about it, there is a Maester in every castle and they all talk to each other. Could that be connected to the message that Otto sent back to Old Town? Now, we here at New Rockstars have to admit that what we call conspiracy is often more likely incompetence. But I don't know, the King's slow rot could be one of these deaths by design that Melos warned of last episode. Otto's necklace is a chain, its design reminiscent of the chains worn by the Citadel Maesters. Maybe he is another link in the chain and that all of these Old Town oldies are connected. But I do like how we see the difference in his tactics compared to his rival Corlys. They both have the same strategy ultimately. They're both trying to push their two young daughters on the Widower King to raise their family station. But while Corlys aggressively pushes his agenda and doesn't make any secrets about it, Otto is sneaky. He just kind of slips his daughter into the room and uses his own dead wife to appeal to Viserys' grief.
And to be compelled to replace her for duty's sake. You are the king, but I do not envy you.
In rhetorical criticism, this tactic is called enthymeme. It's an art of persuasion in which you never explicitly state what you want the person to do. You just use a highly charged emotional argument so that they draw the conclusion in their own heads, and they think it was their own idea. So the too young Lyanna chats with Viserys about the lost dragon Vhagar. That was a massive, still alive dragon ridden by Aegon's sister wife Visenya.
But Vhagar still lives. Somewhere. The workers at Spice Town report hearing her song at times. They say it is a sad thing.
I imagine even dragons get lonely.
Now, of course, Viserys is actually talking about his own loneliness, and these talking points were truly fed to Lyanna by her father, Corlys, who falsely assumes that Viserys is lonely because he no longer rides the dragon Balerion. So maybe by hinting Driftmark folk know where Vhagar is, that could be a benefit that House Valerion could give the crown. But not so fast, because what the Balerions don't really realize is that Viserys thinks dragons shouldn't exist at all. They're all too large for the world. Behind Rhaenyra and Rhaenys is more smutty artwork, what looks like a hookup between humans and a dragon. It was actually believed that among the dark magic practiced by the blood mages of Valyria was crossbreeding humans with dragons. So all that messed up stuff that led to the doom of Valyria is now being celebrated by their doomed descendants in the Red Keep. Alicent's gift of the fixed dragon figurine is perfect for Viserys, a symbol of her ability to mend the fractures of his family, but also it represents dragons as he wishes they would be, lifeless, cast in stone, and small enough to fit in his hands. As he holds the figurine, notice how it covers the hilt of Aegon's dagger. But when duty comes to knocking, Viserys stiffens and the dagger sticks out now, and he deepens his voice.
Come.
I mean, come on. This castle has literal bestiality porn on every surface. Don't tell me that there's not sexual undertones to Otto walking in on these two. The Dragon Keeper reports in Valyrian, Yes, there's a Westerosi custom of naming the hours of the night after animals. The hour of the bat is right after sunset. So after we saw the Master of Sneaks sneaking around last episode, Denmon proves once again that he knows Maegor's secret passageways in King's Landing that no one else does. Rhaenyra asks,
Scorio Dromon Daemon Leitas.
So Dreamfire was a dragon ridden by Rhaena, older sister to Jaehaerys. Rhaena married their brother Aegon, and they were attacked by Maegor when he made a bid for the throne. When Aegon died, Maegor took Rhaena as one of his black brides. So there is a history in Dreamfire being used as a kind of pawn in these games by these rogue princes grasping for the throne. As we swoop into the foggy Dragonstone, we pass the Crown flagship with a mounted dragon head on the bow, as well as grasping dragon claws. Maybe these help prevent the ship from crashing against the rocks. This meetup on the bridge between Otto's detachment and Daemon's gold cloaks is framed from overhead, almost like two bloodlines meeting midstream. Like in the opening credits, only one bloodline can ultimately flow forth. The other is damned. Like, you saw what I did there, like, you know, damned up, but also like in damnation. Notice how Daemon's first gesture here is to toss the egg casually from one hand to the other. If he truly cared about this egg as a nest mate for his baby, he would not be so loose with it, proving that this is all really a stunt. He asks,
"Where is the king? I don't see him."
His Grace would never lower himself to entertain such a mummer's farce.
The reaction shots. Sir Harold was in frame when Otto stopped Viserys from going himself. Now he notes that Otto wanted the win for himself, or maybe Otto really wanted the king to be left alone with his daughter for a night. But then the dragon Caraxes enters. So this series distinguishes its dragons much better than Game of Thrones did, not only by appearance and color, but in the way they sound. Our colleague Joanna Robinson on the Ringiverse podcast quoted Paula Fairfield, who created the dragon sound design for both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Fairfield said Caraxes' whistles and clicks were based on a specific mix that she made for young Drogon in that episode in Astapor in Game of Thrones. Fairfield also said that Miguel Sapochnik said Caraxes should sound like a dragon with a deviated septum. She actually expanded with her own hilarious backstory for the dragon. And notice as Caraxes roars, you can actually see down his gullet and how his windpipe quivers in this awkward way to produce this sound, as a deviated septum would. But the fact that sound designer considered this a pathetic love song for Syrax tells us that Daemon's true affections may reside with his niece. Notice how Caraxes still wears his Targaryen mark's saddle. These dragons are always wearing their saddles even when they're not being ridden in that moment, as an attempt to tame them, but also to let all others know who these WMDs answer to, or at least they want them to think they answer to them. Then we hear a second roar. The fog parts like ocean waves, like the cresting of a great white shark or Godzilla. As Syrax passes the low sun, the sun's dim light peeks through its translucent wings, a visual effect interacting with the physical environment to make it more lifelike. I love it. Rhaenyra confronts her uncle.
Siculant.
Razilari Tubi.
Earlier, Otto called this a mummer's farce, and Rhaenyra sees right through these theatrics. Mysaria is not pregnant, therefore there's no crib for the dragon egg. This is actually a change from the book, where Mysaria is with child. So this way, Daemon is more of an agitator, and Rhaenyra is a bolder fixer. Daemon consoles Mysaria in a room that actually looks a lot like the one in Game of Thrones that contains Aegon's painted table of the map of Westeros. That table would exist at this point in history. It was created by Aegon, but it's not in this room right now. Maybe it's a different room that just looks a lot like it. Or there's a shot from a glassy surface in the foreground. Maybe that is a painted table. It's just tucked in a corner. Before announcing his marriage intentions to the small council, notice Viserys is gazing out the window at the dragon pit, foretelling how this decision will lead to the dance of the dragons that will turn dragon against dragon in the years to come. Viserys first checks in with his daughter. Good gods, once again, the reaction shots are perfect.
I intend to marry. The Lady Alicent Hightower.
Yes, just by how long her father's looking at her, you can see the smile just slightly fade from Rhaenyra's face as she suspects something. But then Viserys looks at Alicent, and Alicent looks at Rhaenyra, and from that, Rhaenyra already knows before he says anything that these two formed a relationship without her knowing. And as the tears well up in her eyes, Rhaenyra connects the dots. Alicent's constellations of the Sept were all manipulations. She has no friend. Her father didn't really know her at all. And even the hall she storms out into is lying to her because they forgot to digitally remove some of the blue screen there. Then on a Driftmark. On Corlys's desk are sea maps with compasses, there's a dragon skull, various seashells, then this barnacled bust that I mentioned before, a visual reminder for Corlys of the fate of his men in the Stepstones, which this episode circles back to as Kragas nails a man to the stake to feed to the crabs. Corlys says,
"We are the realm's second sons, Daemon. Our worth is not given. It must be made."
Now, Corlys does not have an older brother, but he's referring to House Valyrion being the metaphorical younger brother to House Targaryen. The Valyrions passed over because they are not dragon lords. Now, this episode's title is The Rogue Prince, from George R. R. Martin's 2014 novelette about Prince Daemon and his relationship with Viserys. This episode's new bloodline-themed opening suggests that this dynasty was formed by marriages, but really, if anything, stable marriages have been the exception to the rule. Maegor was a rogue prince who stole the Iron Throne from its rightful lineage. The rightful Rhaenys was passed over for another rogue prince, Viserys. So Daemon really knows that his is a family of rogue princes, and ultimately fortune will favor the bold. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at Erik Voss. Subscribe to Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.